Let's see if I remember how to do this. The perfect thumbnail. Yes, serious, I'm trying. So many books, so little time. I hope I got it. If not, hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I have been on such a reread kick lately. All I've been wanting to do when it comes to my books is to reread. But it's kind of sad that whenever I grab a new book, I read about 50 pages. I oftentimes realize that I don't really want to read this book. I want to read something that feels comforting and that I really am in the mood for. And so I gravitate more towards some of the books I've already read in the past years and that I want to revisit. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that I've come to terms with this because I have read so many books over the past years and most of them I've forgotten. But I have become such a critical reader now that nothing satisfies me. I mean, I started reading The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead the other day and it was a fine book. I just didn't want to read it. I just feel like this rereading kick is here to stay, at least for the moment. So basically, my ramble is over, my intro is done. I'm going to show you some books that I have either recently reread or that I plan on rereading very soon because they are books that I loved the first time around and I really want to read them again naturally. So without further ado, let's start with the 4 books which are, well, let's start with the book I'm currently reading, which is Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. I started this one last night. I'm already halfway through it. Such an enjoyment. To begin with, I had forgotten all about the very intrusive narrator, which didn't really please me that much last night. I had forgotten about her, but now I've gotten used to her and I kind of like her sassy voice. And the other day I finished rereading a book which I had forgotten half of. It's kind of scary how I had completely forgotten most of it. And that is Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. It took me about 3 weeks to read this book again. And while that was a long time to read a book again, I 100% loved doing it. Whenever I wasn't reading it and when I was reading another book in between, I thought about Scarlett O'Hara, our main character. I wanted to get back to her and her struggles. Even though she's not that likable of a character, you will know this if you've already read this or watched the movie. When I reached the middle part, I was like, okay, now we've reached the part that I remember. How is this going to continue? Half of this book I have forgotten. I love this thoroughly. This is an amazing story that brought to me the feelings that I needed, so that was a good experience as well. Basically, all the books that I've reread recently have been amazing experiences. Same goes for this one, which is one of my absolute favorite books of all time. I can now say so for sure because I've read it twice. A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. I just have no words. This is a book that you must read. It is a book that teaches you empathy and it is a heartbreaking story, but those stories are also important. Once again, I had forgotten part of the story, but when I reread it, I started remembering it and I was like, oh yeah, this is what happened and this is what broke my heart. And still I'm willing to do it twice just because this is an amazing book. You really must read it. And then the last book I reread recently is The Master and Margarita in this gorgeous edition. This is by Mikhail Bulgakov. It's a Russian classic and this is the 50th anniversary edition. It's only 50 years old. I thought it was older, but nonetheless, this is a book I decided to reread, not because it's one of my favorite books. The first time I read it, I gave it 3 stars because I was utterly confused. I had no idea what I had just read. I didn't remember half of it. I don't think I understood half of it. So I wanted to reread it because I wanted to know the story, really know it. And this time I really got it. I think the first time I read it, I was in a place in life in which my thoughts were elsewhere. And you shouldn't be in that place when you read this book. This time around, the second time around, it was much more memorable. Still not a favorite book of mine, but it's definitely an enjoyment to read and it's also an important piece of work. At least it was for the Russians. Okay, so let's move on to a stack of books which have been in my mind recently and which I really want to reread. First of all, we have 2 books by Jane Austen. I think autumn is the perfect time of year for Jane Austen, winter as well, and I think that's why I want to reread most of her works. So I have here Pride and Prejudice as well as Persuasion. I love these 2 books to pieces and I really want to revisit them, hence why they are in this video. Another book which is not a classic is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I said it's not a classic, but it might become one someday because it seems to be a book that most people love. And I'm not saying everyone loves it at all, but it's a very popular one and it's a very peculiar story. I've already read this book twice actually, so when I reread it, it's going to be a 3rd time, but that's how good it is. I remember a scene that I loved about a dinner party of 2 people at a restaurant, and then what happens when the person who was supposed to pay for it all has forgotten his wallet. The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, a personal favorite of mine that I love to reread over Christmas because it takes place over Christmas. So that one is on my list as well. And then we also have one of my absolute favorite authors of all time. That is, of course, John Steinbeck. And the book of his that I want to reread pretty soon is The Grapes of Wrath, which I've only read once and it took me away that first time. So I'm definitely going to give it a reread. I recently, or in the past few years, I also reread his East of Eden. And that one is, I can't really figure out if that is my favorite of his or if it's this one. But maybe I will be able to make up my mind when I reread this one. The last book in my immediate TBR pile of books I want to reread is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, my favorite classic. I love this book to pieces and I've read it 3 times now in my lifetime and I'm not done rereading this one. Let's move on to the last section of this video, which is going to be some books that I do plan on rereading, but not tomorrow. Harry Potter, not the entire series, just the 5th book. I don't know why I settled on the 5th book. I think it's because it's the book that I remember the least from, even though I have reread the whole series at least twice, I think. But this one I just faintly remember. This is the Danish version, which I found in my parents' attic from when I read it the first time around and fell in love with the series. So I do think that this is the edition that I want to reread once I decide to do so. This one was bought, oh, I can't see. I thought I would be able to see, but I can't. So anyway, Harry Potter. And then we have a book which I didn't absolutely love when I read it the first time. It is a dystopian and it is for adults. Ever since I read it, so many people have claimed their love for it. And that's enough to make me curious as to what the love is really about. I mean, I don't know what it is. I just kind of want to reread this one and I do own it, so why not? I am talking about Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. I think I'm right in saying that she has a new book coming out, so I might reread this one and see if I really love it enough to also read her 2nd book coming out. 2 books left. Next we have this one, which is an old Danish edition of The House of Spirits by Isabel Allende. I'm sure you've heard of this book. I read it once and that was years and years ago, and I remember really liking it. I read it over a summer and I just really want to revisit it because it's one of those books that I have partly forgotten. I mean, I remember sections of it, but not all of it. Last but not least, I have a book which I might reread this winter if I have time for it, and that is I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith. I really loved this book when I read it the first time. I know that it's not everyone's favorite, but there was something about it that intrigued me. I loved the main character and her voice, Cassandra Mortmain, that's her name. I loved reading about her family and her childhood and growing up. I'm a sucker for growing up stories, and this one was just up my alley. So this one is definitely on my to be reread list as well. I think that's it. I feel like I'm kind of awkward in this video. It's been some time since I last filmed, but nevertheless, I hope you got something out of it. Let me know in the comments if you have any books that you would like to reread in the future because you just love them so much so that they are worth reading a second time. I would love to know those titles. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and until my next one, happy reading!